Welcome back to Joey's HR Lounge, the show where we dig into the real questions facing HR leaders today. I'm your host, Joey Price, President and CEO of Jumpstart HR and the founder of Joey's HR Lounge. Today's guest is a leader deeply engaged in the evolving world of work, especially as organizations rethink where and how work gets done. She's passionate about building people-centric cultures that champion flexibility, trust, and equity. Please welcome Baily Dyer, Head of People and Culture at Revaly, and a strong voice on how policies like return to office mandates are impacting the workforce, particularly working parents and women. Baily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Joey.
Of course, it is truly my pleasure, and I'm glad you said yes to the show. Before we dive in, for those who have been following the show, I always ask our leaders their hot HR take. It's a mouthful. You said return to office mandates are hurting working parents, particularly women, and employees can be just as, if not more, productive and engaged when working from home. We're going to explore that and more today, and there's certainly research to back that up. But Bailey, of all of the takes you could have had from your HR experience, both lived and learned, why was that the hot take that you wanted to share today?
I would say a lot of it is, first of all, personal experience. So, being a mother of two, knowing what it is like to work in an office, to do the commute, and then having that juxtaposition of what it is like to be able to work from home and the ways that I am able to show up both as an employee and as a parent based on where I am working. So, not only what I've seen work for me and how fulfilling that's been for me in my life, but also what I am seeing for the people I am working with and the people who work for Revaly, as well as the many amazing people who I am constantly interviewing. And I hear a lot of stories of people who are, putting themselves back out looking for work simply because they're at a company that is issuing some broad sweeping RTO policies. So just really seeing the way that this is impacting people's lives left, right, and center, as well as personally, is what makes me so passionate about helping to create a workplace and to show that remote work can be done. It can be done well. It can be done in a way where both the businesses and the employees can succeed and feel empowered. Proving all the naysayers wrong. I feel like being in an office is absolutely necessary in order to further advance your career, as well as to help companies succeed.
Yeah, no, very well said. And you've been very articulate about trust and transparency as the foundation of modern work policies. How do you define trust in an organizational context? And then how does that shape your people strategy?
A huge part of trust is psychological safety. So I want our leaders to truly trust in the people that they are bringing on board and the people that are working for them. Micromanagement is not something that exists at Revaly. It is not something that we support. And we've seen that it's not something that is necessary. So when you trust your people, when you give them the right information and the right tools and the space to do their best work, we see that amazing things can happen. So I think that is absolutely huge. Having that psychological safety is also important because when you do trust people, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to succeed, that they're going to hit it out of the park the first time, but you trust that people are going to do their best. And when it doesn't work, they're going to be transparent and honest about it. And then as employees, knowing that you have leaders who are going to have your back when you do need help when something hasn't gone right.
No, I love that. And I love that. Well, there are two kinds of people in this world. There are those where for them trust starts at zero and you have to build it up to 100. And then other leaders who choose to trust at 100 and then through the interactions that either remains or it dips. And it sounds like what you've seen to work best in work remote environment is let's keep trust at 100 and give people the opportunities to uphold their end of that commitment.
Definitely, I find that when you step out of people's way and allow them to do their best work and trust them, people show up and they show up in amazing ways. They show up in ways that surpass expectations. And so I find that that's really what's been working best to help Revaly grow and get where we want to be, is bringing those people in and starting from, like you said, that area of the trust already existing. People don't have to earn that trust. When people make it through the recruitment process, that sort of is the level set of, hey, you've gotten this far, you've met the people, the vibes have been good, everything we've seen has been great. We're ready to move forward and trust. And then transparency, again, is a huge part of that as well. So making sure that, yes, people are independently working on projects, but there's a transparency if somebody wants to see and have that visibility into what they're doing. That's easy to do. Nobody's holding their cards close to the chest. Everybody's being open, communicative. Communication is a huge intentional thing when it comes to a remote workplace as well. So having those communication channels that allow for transparency, that allow for that openness, and can then allow for that trust to really continue to be built, rather than deteriorated. Because I think there is a lot of, especially within leadership, there's a lot of concern that, hey, if I can't see my people and see what they're doing, how can I trust that they're using that time wisely? How can I trust that they're doing the right thing? And with the proper mechanisms, as well as with the proper people in place, um, managers and leaders should be able to know that they can trust that their team is going to do what they should be doing. And is going to reach out to them if they have issues. There doesn't need to be somebody, sitting at a cubicle a couple feet away, watching what's happening and making sure that people really are working when they say they are.
No, absolutely. And I was going to ask you about the naysayers who say productivity drops without face to face time, and you touched on it a bit, but as you have you formulated this perspective and lived experience of productivity increasing and being on par with those who are in the office, what data did you turn to, or case studies, or examples within your organization? Is there any that you care to share with the
Yeah.
audience that they
I
might?
would say even when you look at some studies that talk about, the actual hours that people are spending working while they're working remotely. On average, it's about 30 minutes minimum per day that is being spent working more so than people who would be commuting into offices. And a lot of that is that flexibility that exists that, I don't need to get into my car and get somewhere before I can be productive in my day. I simply need to open my laptop, don't even need to get out of my pajamas. Same thing with at night. I have seen our people when we have, a massive deadline or a 911 emergency that comes up, rather than people needing to get to an office, you can take care of your life at home and then log back on. So things that would have previously kept me at the office, late into an evening, missing bedtime with my kids, missing those important parts of my day so that I could get something done. Whereas now I have the opportunity to say, hey, I'm stepping away for an hour, going to go eat dinner with my family. I'm going to put my kids to bed, and then I'm getting back online and taking care of something at a far more rapid pace than I would have been if I needed to be in an office. So I'd say even when we look at sort of our team's velocity from the technical perspective,
Mhm.
the amount of time that we are able to turn out fixes, our SALs, everything has just minimized when people have had the ability to work from home and work where they want to be versus needing to get into that office before they can actually start being productive in their day.
Yeah, and as a husband and parent as well, um, one of the things that I appreciate about starting a business that is fully remote and now having team members who are on board is, one of the things that my university asked me when I came back to speak as an alma mater. They said, "Well, why'd you start your business?" And I said, "We live in such a global environment now where people don't manage or live by 8-hour shifts. They live by 24-hour days." And so I didn't want to have to take PTO to visit my mom and have lunch, or go to a soccer game, or take a child to a doctor's office appointment. And so we just live in this new reality that requires new flexibility. Um, and we know that the flexibility that we're both talking about, it's not just a perk. It's also an equity issue as well. In your view, how are RTO policies disproportionately affecting women and working parents? And what should HR leaders be thinking about to reverse those effects? And I'll add a caveat to that. to reverse those effects and convince senior leadership that those effects need to be reversed. Because I'm
Sure.
sure we're preaching to the choir, but
Yeah.
there are other rooms that we show up in where we have to have meaningful conversations around the topic.
Very much so. So I would say, I mean, the proof is in the data that over the past 2 years, for what I believe is the first time since about the 1960s, the gender pay gap has actually widened. And a lot of the reason we're seeing this is because these RTO policies are disproportionately affecting working mothers who are choosing to either completely leave the workforce or to take a step back, take lower paying jobs that offer them the flexibility that they're giving up when the company they're with says they're expected to be back in the office for an unreasonable period of time or even any time at all. Ultimately, yes, gender equity has improved, but at the end of the day, mothers still typically take on a majority of those parenting responsibilities. And I know that's not true in every relationship. My husband and I have always had a rule back when we were both working in office where each of us had years where that was our year to focus on the career. And that meant the other parent was the default who got the calls from the school or the daycare when kids were sick. And we would take turns because we both recognized that if we split it, both of us would not be any further ahead in our careers because that was something that was frowned upon, right? The people who were present were the people who were getting the promotions. But we were, leadership is confusing visibility with productivity. Just because a person's able to be in an office 5 days a week and able to be there, before everyone else gets there and stay late does not mean that that person is a better employee than somebody who needs to be working from home because they have other things to juggle. In fact, a lot of the time, those people who have a lot of things to juggle are the ones who are able to be incredibly productive in shorter periods of time, who are able to prioritize differently because they know how to juggle those things and they frankly have no choice. I would say that a huge thing that we can do as HR when leadership is looking at, needing people back in the office is getting to the root of what problem are leaders trying to solve here. Because very often the problems that they are trying to solve are not problems that are going to truly be solved by having everyone back in the office. If it's a lack of productivity, maybe it's looking at the processes and the ways of working. Maybe it's looking at the people who are filling specific roles. If it's a lack of trust, again, this doesn't this isn't something that is going to be resolved. People will always find new ways to look busy and to appear to be working when they are not. It's about having people within your team that you can trust. So I think a really big part of it is let's filter down to what the actual issue is, and solve for that issue and bring forward potential solutions that are not bringing people back to an office to allow for micromanaging.
Yeah.
Um, so that's always been my take is what are we actually trying to resolve here? If there is somebody who you need to be checking in on every 30 minutes to ensure they're doing their job or doing their job well, is it a training problem? Do we need to go back and look at onboarding and ramping this person back up in an appropriate way? Is it outsourcing some training? Is it leadership training? A lot of that is, a lot of leaders who aren't as progressive as some of the leaders that I've been very lucky to work with
Mhm.
feel that they need to be micromanaging, feel that they need to be constantly looking over their employees' shoulders. So sometimes it's training those leaders or retraining those leaders and helping them rewire their brains to understand what they should expect of employees and when it is appropriate to step back and get out of employees' ways to allow them to do great work.
So good. So good. So for those of you just pick this podcast back up, we're chatting with Baily Dyer, head of people and culture at Revaly. And she's an amazing, strong voice on RTO mandates and how they impact the workforce. Let's look at how we can dive a little bit deeper into coaching executives on this topic. Um, I've said it earlier that it's preaching to the choir of HR professionals um, commiserating and agreeing with the value of flexibility, but for some reason, executives don't always understand that, or maybe there are outside forces where they do understand, but maybe it's shareholders, maybe it's accountability group that they're a part of, and they're hearing, RTO, RTO, RTO. Maybe it's what people are executives are reading or seeing in government shifts or in enterprise shifts in thinking from a corporate level. If you had to coach a new executive in your organization on how to reframe measuring engagement and commitment by seat time and shifting that to thinking about outcomes and well-being, what are the three things that you would have that executive focus on so that uh, workplace flexibility can rise and be effective in the office?
I think the first thing would be KPI tracking. And first of all, really examining those KPIs and determining what the appropriate KPIs are. So, what is a true key performance indicator that is indicative of not a person putting in a specific period of time, but actually being productive and pushing the team, their role, the company towards their goals and their ultimate targets? So, allowing a leader to look at KPIs for various people within a specific role and getting to understand that, hey, the person that I'm seeing online the most or in person the most is not necessarily the person who is crushing those KPIs and who is meeting those. So I think under separating the intent of a person's role and their ultimate purpose within an organization from their visibility would be first. I also think a lot of it is a mindset shift. So, what I've often said to leaders is when we allow for remote employees, we are actually expanding the doorway for who can come through and actually work for us and be productive. So, if I had a leader who had the choice between 10 candidates and those top 9 candidates were all fully remote, they would not be able to work for our organization if we said they needed to come into an office. Would they rather go with that 10th ranked employee or get one of those, that top employee who they're confident would be able to have an impact, but would do that remotely? And I think that that's been something that's we've been really great with and really not lucky because it's been very intentional at Revaly, but we've been able to bring in such brilliant people who are all over. We would not be able to have these people working for us if we had an actual office that they needed to go to. So I think showing leadership what can happen when we remove those constraints of a physical location for bringing people in is another huge part of it. And then I would say looking at data from our engagement surveys, so employee net promoter scores. There was a study from, I believe it was the University of Pittsburgh that found that 99% of companies that issued RTO mandates had a drop in employee satisfaction. 99%. There's no room for interpretation there. So I think seeing that at Revaly, something we take huge pride in is our employee engagement scores. We are well above industry average. And a lot of that does have to do with the flexibility and freedom that our employees get, and how fulfilled they're able to be in their personal and professional lives, which is typically not possible when you're expected to be in an office. You are always giving something up, either giving part of your professional life up or giving part of your personal life up. So being able to say, and, even just talking to employees about the fact, somebody's coming in completely energized because the day before they took an hour off to go watch their kid's soccer game, which is something that they know that they would not have been able to do prior, or they were able to take time off to be there for a family member who needed them while still getting important things done because they were remote. So I think seeing those lived experiences, hearing about the things that our employees are able to do because they are fully remote and the ways that they are able to be fulfilled in so many places in their lives because of that. Also, from any sort of leader who is going to have empathy and care for the full well-being of their employees, I think that really hits home for those leaders.
Well said, well said. And I believe that the work from home creates a virtuous cycle of my employer has my back by allowing me the flexibility to uh, pursue things that fill my cup, whether that is the soccer game or maybe it's the yoga class in between meetings, or maybe it's even being the parent who has the flexibility to take children to school if it's a later start to the day. It creates that virtual cycle of, well, I'm going to show up for the organization. I'm going to push towards those KPIs. I'm going to make things happen with my team. I'm going to encourage buy-in and boosting the employer brand because I know that they'd effectively do the same for me. So I love that.
Yes, I think we've all had that moment of sitting in an office when something's going on in our personal life where we don't want to be there. And you are no more engaged from that. If anything, you are trying to fight off feelings of resentment um, and discontent because this workplace and the environment you're in has stopped you from being able to do something that either is incredibly important to you that you're really passionate about. So knowing that our employees never have to feel that way and never have to make those choices and have those, um, negative connotations to the work and when they're expected to work is huge. And you see such a difference in the impact and the dedication and commitment from employees um, when they know that they can step away for the things that matter. Because I think everybody can recognize work is not all there is. We all have a lot going on behind our computer screens and what we are doing. And having companies that acknowledge that and respect that is huge.
Well, I'm sure you get a lot of feedback and attention from your applicants who are looking at jobs online. So I want to talk a little bit about talent strategy. How does your flexible work arrangements factor into candidate decision making and long term engagement at Reveille?
It is a massive factor. I would say um, 90% of candidates I speak to when I ask why they are looking for a new role is because their companies have either implemented or are speaking about implementing RTO policies.
Mhm.
I've talked to people who, through their workplace going fully remote, had moved to other parts of the country, had completely changed their living arrangements, either out of absolute necessity or for the better, and in order to be closer to family, things like that. And then all of a sudden, the company that at one point had said to them, yes, we're going to stay fully remote, have decided, no, everybody needs to be back in the office. And that's no longer geographically possible or feasible for these people.
Mhm.
So it is definitely a huge factor. I'll interview candidates and they'll say, they'll sort of do a gut check and say, do you have an office? Is there any intent to return to an office? And I'll sort of have to, comfort them and say, we are a completely remote workforce. We have no office to go back to.
Yeah.
So, to kind of ease people's anxieties because they have been, swindled before and told
Yeah.
that the roles they were taking would be fully remote and then something changes. So that definitely has an impact. And I would say in terms of retention and keeping our people, again, it's a huge factor is the flexibility of being fully remote. Unfortunately, those jobs are becoming harder and harder to come by, but they are something that, I think everybody who's experienced them really prioritizes that. And many people really aren't willing to go back, specifically in certain stages of life where whether it be people having aging parents, young children, um, office life just doesn't work for that demographic. So I would say, for our key demographic of employees, this is a huge factor for them. And it's not only the remote work, it's the things that come along with remote work, like the intentional culture building and the intentional communication that are things that people really appreciate about working at Revaly. And I think at a lot of remote companies when they're doing it right, because it does take a lot more intention than an in-office environment. So that becomes part of the culture and our core values are those things that enable us to continue being remote and successful. And those are things that our employees love about working at Revaly. And, we've had employees who have left and chosen to come back um, and state that what we have here is so unique and so well done. And sort of that people had forgotten. And, you work somewhere for such a long time, you start to take for granted
Mm.
that what you have is really unique. And then by going back out into the workforce and realizing, wait, this isn't how every company operates.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd say it's really helped us hold on to fabulous people, and help them grow and help them be fulfilled in multiple areas of their lives. So, getting to not only see how people are able to grow professionally, but how they're also be able to grow personally and how the things they're able to do, the places they can travel, the things that people are able to do with their families, um, has really solidified for us that remaining fully remote was the right decision.
Yeah. And that absolutely tracks with research that we're seeing where there's a lot of um, conversation around 2026 being the year of job hugging, where employees are going to be locked into their roles and are looking for job opportunities less. But I'm confident that the candidates that you will see spike as far as looking for more opportunities are the ones who are in pursuit of remote work. And so I think that while job hugging will be a major trend, I still think you'll see more attrition from those groups that have RTO mandates than the ones that say we offer work flexibility, whether it be a hybrid or fully remote. And so the year will play out how it will, and we'll see how that prediction goes, but I'm pretty confident that uh, the flexible work environments will have stronger retention than those that don't.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, let's talk technology a little bit. So, I'm sure you're a part of the buying process for the tools that your organization uses, whether it be those HR tools that live within your department, or even maybe the L&D tools or communication tools that you use at Revaly. So, from your perspective as a HR buyer, how are you evaluating investments in the people experience, especially when tools touch on work location strategies? So, long story short, how does your focus on work from home or work flexibility show up in how you evaluate the technology that you buy?
I would say a huge part of it is tools um, that enable us to be async, that improve communication while remaining asynchronous is huge, as well as tools that provide visibility. So, project planning tools, things that allow anybody within the organization to go in and say, "Hey, what is product working on right now, and where are they tracking towards that?" So that is definitely a huge part of what we are looking for. Is communication tools, making sure that we have ways to ensure that work is visible across the entire organization, that our knowledge databases are easy to sift through, are easy for people to use. So that's been a huge push for us, particularly over this last year of documentation of over documenting everything. We are a small team, and I'm sure you know just how disastrous it can be when something unexpected happens and the one person who does one specific role is now out of pocket.
Yeah.
So making sure that we have things documented so that anybody can go in and fight fires when needed is definitely huge as well. And things that are easy for people to use. I was recently having this conversation actually with one of my colleagues that one of the biggest problems in shifting to new technologies is that everybody's so busy that they don't have the time to truly learn how to be a power user of a tool.
Mm.
Instead, they just see a tool as an extra hurdle they have to jump through. So making sure that things are easy to use, that yes, you can dive in and be a power user, but you can also figure out how to use things quickly and use them learn as you go, is definitely really important for us as well. Uh,
Awesome. Well, I've got one final question. As we think about 2026 and beyond, what are some of the trends that have your attention right now beyond RTO versus flexible work arrangement? And can you share a few of those so that our audience might be looking into those as well?
for sure. I think a big push right now is leadership as well as junior leadership training on both psychological safety and emotional intelligence. So one thing, I chat about with my leadership team often is that there's a lot happening in the world right now. Life is heavy for a lot of people. And a lot of people have a lot going on that we don't know about. And as leaders, while I don't expect anyone to be an armchair therapist by any means, I do want our leaders to lead with empathy. And I want everybody within our company to be treated as a full human being, not a means to an end. And that's not always something that's second nature to people. People don't love getting into discussions where people might become emotional or express emotions. So, working on getting our leadership team and our people leaders, getting their emotional intelligence scores to rise is huge. Getting them to understand how to have um, difficult conversations, challenging conversations with compassion is huge. And then psychological safety is always going to be something that I push. But I think, particularly right now, again, with the state of the world, having people knowing that when they come to work, they're in a safe space, they're in a space where they're respected, where, you know, you're having an off day because things are falling apart behind the computer screen and something slips. There's not going to be a slap on the wrist for that. You're going to be supported. We're all human. So I think really bringing the human back to human resources is something that I think is important now more so than ever when, there's just so much happening and so many people being affected by those things. Um, we can't forget about that. I don't ever want, anybody to feel like they are simply a means to an end or a head count. Um, we've got to respect and take into consideration people's lived experiences and what is happening outside, because at the end of the day you can't just drop that at the door. No matter how much you'd like to try, you're bringing some of that with you, and the better uh, people leaders can be at acknowledging that and recognizing it. They can't necessarily solve for it, but by being supportive, um, that's going to allow our people to do their best work and to feel safe in the environment they're in, and be able to, raise their hands and say they need to step back when they need to.
Well, Bailey, thank you so much for joining me in the lounge. I know that this information that you shared and conversation was super impactful for the HR pros who are tuning in. I wish you continued success as head of people and culture at Revaly. And how can people find you if they want to follow your work and your thoughts on work flexibility?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. So I love to share my thoughts, my realities on what's happening in my life and the way that that is impacting my work experience as well. So I try to keep it as real as possible. I'm definitely not polished. Just a little bit more laid back, very not corporate. So you can follow me on LinkedIn to get all my thoughts and internal dialogue.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And thank you again for being on the show. For those who are tuning in, definitely check out this episode, share with a friend, and make sure to join us in Joey's HR Lounge, the new community for HR professionals, to have laid back and inspiring conversations about the work that we're seeing in the office or wherever we're working. So you can check it out at joey'shrlounge.com and stay tuned for more episodes. Until then, have a great day.